So thank you very much for that introduction, and I guess I know a lot of you in here. So again, I'm Lars Johan Liman. I've been around in the DNS business for quite a long time. It actually goes back to, you saw Kjetil on stage earlier today when he said that the Norwegian Internet Exchange was kind of modeled after the one at the Royal Institute of Technology here in Stockholm. That's where I was at the time. And that's also where the first root name server outside the US was located. It was operating there when I started to work at the KTH. So when Netnod was created, the root service kind of moved along to operate from the exchange point so that we could have it outside NordUnet, which was the home for the root name server back in the day. So as Ellen mentioned, that was 30 years ago. And if you look at technology, a lot of things have happened. I'm not going to talk about that this time. But if you look at governance, how the root server system is tied together and how the relationships work between the various players, a lot has happened, and even more, sorry, not much has happened, but it's about to happen almost as I speak here. So I will talk about the root server governance, what's going on, what's going to happen in the root server system, and where are we right now. So if we start with an overview of the root server system, most of you will know that the root server system serves data from the root zone, which is in short a database file. It's not terribly big, but it's terribly important. So the root servers do receive very many questions about the data points in the root zone. And the root zone contains the list of all the top-level domains in the world, obviously .se for Sweden, but .comnet, .org, UK, NL, US, the long list. And also the so-called generic top-level domains. They could be .bank or .travel or so. And these are treated in exactly the same way in DNS terms. There are no technical difference between these two generic and country code top-level domains. So as a root server operator, I don't care. Technology is exactly the same. So the root is the entry point to the DNS system, and they constitute a vital part of the internet's infrastructure, and they are operated by 12 organizations that are, so to speak, totally independent of each other. If you look at them as organizations, they are totally independent of each other, and they also do not operate under a common umbrella. There is no organization that ties the root server operators together, like an association or anything like that. So we have 12 independent organizations that operate independently, but with the same technical goal. Okay, so how does Netnod fit into this? Well, Netnod is a very small organization. It's quite efficient and flexible compared to some of the others. And you need to realize here that the various organizations are different in so many ways. They come in sizes from Netnod, we are roughly 30 employees, to the US Army. That's I don't even know if themselves know how many people they are in there. I don't think that tens of thousands, I mean hundreds of thousands of people. And we also have different ways to different processes and ways to make decisions. So the US Army has a different way of making decisions from Netnod. I will walk up into Ellen's office. The full stretch is 10 meters, and I'll ask for, we need to do this with the root name server, and he can make a decision. Yeah, that's a good idea. Please do that. And we are done. The Army in the United States, slightly heavier processes. And this is a good thing, because the root server operators have a motto, and the motto is diversity is good, because diversity creates the redundancy that we need and want to have in the root server system. So the fact that the organizations are very different is important, and that's something that we rely on in our cooperation. So, and Netnod is owned by a foundation, as you know, which has a target of doing good for the internet, and that helps us because the root service, we provide that without getting anything back financially from the network for the specific case of providing the root service. So what we do is we provide other services as well for top-level domains, for instance, which is a commercial service that we charge for, and we use a bit of that money to provide the root service as well. And we also have these reseller enterprise services that also generates a bit of income, and we can use a bit of that to provide the root service. And this creates actually a win-win situation because the lower layers in the DNS tree are actually, it's quite vital for them that the root, the apex of the system is there and works. So if it doesn't work, the lower layers are kind of totally irrelevant. We operate root service from roughly 75 locations worldwide, and this is just a picture of where we are deployed. This changes, I wouldn't say by the day, but at least by the week or month, and we do not always have all sites in operation at the same time, because sometimes we need to service one, or we have a hardware problem or something. But as we use Anycast for this, you probably, hopefully, won't notice if we take 1 or 2 or 10 out of service for some time to fix things and then bring them back online again. Root Server Governance. How is this root server system, these 12 organizations, how do they cooperate, and how does it work? Well, as I mentioned, the root server operators are independent and considered equal. We provide the same service, not exactly with the same type of hardware or the same type of software or the same networking equipment, because that's also a place where we say diversity is good. If we happen to use a specific type of operating system and there is a major flaw in that operating system that suddenly creates a vulnerability, maybe our friends in the other organization operates on a different operating system which doesn't have that flaw, and if we are hit and our service takes a hit, the service from the others will probably, hopefully, continue to work. So we act as backup or redundancy for each other. The root server operators cooperate very closely on technical matters. We have regular meetings where we discuss the technology, the service that we provide, and we also have emergency contact ways and collaboration tools so that we can get in contact and in touch with each other very quickly if we have to, if there's a major problem with the entire international root service system as a whole. Fortunately, that hasn't happened, but we've had, over my career, which stretches now 30 years back in time, we've had 2 or 3 incidents over 30 years where we have actually had a reason to talk to each other on an urgent matter. It wasn't such a crisis that the system was down, but we felt that we needed to interact. The roots of operators are still different organizations, and we come from different backgrounds with different different experiences, but there are certain things that we absolutely need to agree on, and the most crucial one of those things is which data to serve. And that's where we sat down in a room back in 1998 and said that we decided jointly in this room and unanimously that the DNS data that has its source at the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, which is the office that keeps track of the data that is the source for the root zone that we publish. We all agree that that is the data that we publish, and we publish it verbatim. We make no changes whatsoever to that data. And today, the process is such that IANA generates input to the root zone maintainer, which is, in this case, VeriSign, the corporation VeriSign, which operates under contract. And through VeriSign, we get VeriSign generates the actual zone file, and we copy it from VeriSign. All the root server operators copy it from VeriSign. So all root server operators firmly agree that IANA is the single source of truth here, and that we publish the zone exactly as it sits. But still note that no single authority, so no single entity has authority over the root server operators. So we just got together in a room and we looked at each other and said, yes, let's do this. The root server system was kept together back in the early days by IANA, and especially the IANA manager, John Postel. Now, he unfortunately died very suddenly in 1998, and he, so to speak, was the governance system, he himself, and he was also the person, or he was the process for succession in the root server system. If someone wanted to quit, or if we needed to add a new root server operator to the system, John Postel was the decision maker. When he died, he hadn't had time to put in place a replacement system or a backup system for the case that he would go away. He was aware that that needed to be done, and he had started the process by participating in the discussions that led to what we now know as ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. But the succession for root server operators and the governance of the root server system was pretty much left alone when ICANN was created. So for more than 20 years, there hasn't been processes for governing the root server system or have succession in the root server system, because no one has dared to open that box. Within ICANN, there is a committee called the Root Server System Advisory Committee, of which I am a member, and I was temporarily also its chair. And it's one of the original parts of ICANN, and it's an advisory board to the ICANN board of directors. So it gives advice. It doesn't control anything, but it gives advice. And RSAC is composed by these 12 organizations, or a representative from them. I happen to be the one from Netnod. And for each of us 12, there is also an alternate. So in case I am not able to make it to a meeting, Patrick Feldström can step in my case, and so for the rest. And we also have a number of liaisons to other organizations, mostly within ICANN, but also, for instance, to the Internet Architecture Board, which is the main technical, the highest technical body on the internet. So back in, I believe, 2015, RSAC felt that we really need to address, the internet community really needs to address the problem of succession and governance of the root server system. And at one point that triggered this is that we the root server operators, are feeling increased pressure for accountability. There are organizations and even entire countries that think that the current ways things are operated aren't transparent enough. There are no ways for governments to influence the system, they believe. Since there was nothing to show them, because we don't really have a good governance system today, we decided to open the Pandora's box and say, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. No one else does it, so we will have to open the box. So we did. So RSAC sat down in a series of workshops, and that took 3 years roughly. And what we did was to discuss the problem. So what do we see? What is the problem here? And that led to a discussion of which are the stakeholders in the root server system. Obviously, the root server operators themselves, but also the ICANN community with the users, the top-level domain registries, the governments are represented in ICANN, and also the end users have a say in the ICANN community. So that was a way to figure out the stakeholders. That took a lot of discussion, but that's where we ended. And we also included the Internet Architecture Board / the IETF as a stakeholder, because that's the technical side with specifications of the DNS and operational instructions and stuff. So these are the stakeholders. And then, let me see if that's the next slide. Yes. We created a document. These workshops, this series of workshops led to a document, which is a rather thick thing, but it contains, to begin with, principles of operation. Under which principles do we operate this service? What are the important properties of the root service that we believe should be maintained going forward into whatever new system we come up with? We identified the stakeholders, and we also looked at the relationships between the various stakeholders, how this is all tied together. And then we defined what we believe are the necessary functions. And we were very careful to use the word function here. These are decision makers and other functions that perform work that needs to happen in the root server system. So one of these can, for instance, be the strategic planning and architecture function, which is the function where people sit down and look into the future and say, we need a root server system that works like this, that can handle this type of technology, that is ready to handle this type of load, and so on. And there could be a performance and monitoring function, so something that looks at the current system, how it operates, see if it stays within certain thresholds, and so on. So it identified a number of these functions. By design, we decided to not put these functions in various bodies, say this committee should do this function or that committee should do that function. We said that's for a later stage of this development. But from these functions, we generated a strawman proposal. This is a model of how the root service system can be governed by functions, not by committees yet. And we also carefully stayed out of who shall sit on which committee, who shall the representatives be there. In addition to all this, we also created a number of scenarios. These are things that we believe will happen in the future. We need to create a new root server operator. How will that happen? Given the functions that we have defined and given the principles of operation and the stakeholders, what is the process through this model? And we did that for a couple of scenarios and baked that into this document, RSAC 37, which we then sent to the ICANN board. Wasn't that a big step? No, it wasn't. To the ICANN board. So RSAC 37 was sent to the board with a letter that asked the board to convene something called a cross-community working group. So the board was asked to create a working group with members from the various stakeholder corners to sit together and hammer out the details of a future proposal for root server governance. And the first implementation, the ICANN board sat on that for a year and a half before anything happened, but they actually did convene a cross-community working group. And the reason for cross-community here is that the root server operator feel that this is a service that we provide to the general internet. And there are so many stakeholders involved here that we shouldn't decide the future for a public system. We need to have input from other players as well. So we asked them to create a cross-community working group. So what we have in that working group are three people appointed by root server operators. They are not representatives. They are people there in their own merit, but appointed by the root server operators. So I'm one of them. We have two people appointed by the Internet Architecture Board, and we have a couple of people appointed by various subgroups of ICANN. So we have, for instance, the country code name supporting organization, the registry stakeholder group, and the Security and Stability Advisory Committee. So we got together in 2019 to develop a final plan based on the strawman proposal from RSAC. And after some time, and there were lots of discussions, meetings every 2 weeks, we started to put things together into a document which was something that other people could start to read. And then other root server operators who didn't have members on this committee started to have some serious concerns about the content, because what this group had designed did not fit with what some of the root server operators thought that the strawman proposal actually contained. So the root server operators decided to step on the brake and said, "Oops, no, this is not heading in the right direction. Please hold." So that happened. And the root server operators, and carefully note, not the root server system advisory committee as such, the root server operators stepped aside and said, we need to agree on a common set of criteria that need to be fulfilled by the upcoming solution or the upcoming proposal. So the root server operator created a document called the success criteria, which is an evaluation form, if you wish, for future proposals. And it contains a lot of checks and balances that will help this working group to assess the output of its work and to gauge whether it will be accepted by the root server operators or not. And it's not black and white. It's not yes and no. It contains guidelines and issues to address and grayscale assessments. And some of them are even in conflict with each other, but these are things that the working group need to have a clear answer to how they have addressed these issues and criteria. That was published actually by RSAC. You will note a contradiction here, but RSAC published this document because that's a publication channel that the root server operators have at their disposal. So this is how the root server operators can generate a public document. So success criteria was created, and it has an accompanying document which is advice to the board. Remember, RSAC creates advice. So that advice was sent to the board, asking the board to send this document as input to the working group and say, this is new input for you. You need to have a look at this, and this is part of your instruction. And also, let me see, isn't that, no, it's, yes. And also to reconstitute the working group so that all root server operators have a seat at the table. So instead of just 3, there would be all 12 of them. So during this time, the working group was waiting, not doing any work, waiting for the input from the root server operators. And once that document was published, they released the brake and started to work again, looking at the document. Now, things happen in parallel here. The document was published, which meant that it was accessible. So the working group could start to work with it and take it into account even before the board actually gave them the instruction. So in parallel to the working group continuing its work, the board processed the advice and also gave the instruction to extend the working group. And that has now happened. The board has instructed the working group to take these success criteria into account and to repopulate the working group. And we have just recently had 9 more members appointed. The working group has been expanded. And on top of that, we also have a bit of rotation of members. We've been working for 2 years, and some of the members simply don't have time, or they have new jobs, or things happen. So we have a couple of members who have stepped down for reasons that do not relate to the working group. We don't have any conflicts or anything like that. But we have people who have stepped down, and one of them is our current chair. So we are this very minute nominating new people for the chair position of this working group. That happens this week, and next week we will have an election for a new chair. So the GWG right now is that we have submitted the status report and delivered that to the ICANN board. We have created new decision-making requirements. So instead of majority voting in the working group, we now need to reach full consensus. so that all the root server operators can feel that they are actually on board with every decision that's taken. And again, the nomination and election happens this and next week. So going forward from this, we will restart the work. We will look at the existing proposal that is half-baked. We will probably look at alternate proposals that are likely to appear in the near future. And now we have this success criteria document to compare them with, so that we can see, it's easier for us to see which have the properties that we need to go forward and for these proposals to be accepted. And the process of weeding out the bad ones is now easier because we have this success criteria document. So once we have a new chair, we will choose a path forward, and we will continue to work with this and develop a final proposal, which we hope to submit in March 2023. Now, the time schedule for this has slipped already twice, and I wouldn't be surprised if it slips again, but this is something that has to be slow. We have to get it right. So being very slow and consensus about this is a good thing. I would be much more worried if this was put together in 6 months' time and said, yeah, done, let's go. So I'm actually glad that this is slow. I probably need to put in this slide. If anyone, this is the end of the governance part. If anyone in here feels that a root name server at my exchange point or in my large ISP would be a good thing, come and talk to me. This is what we need from you. There is a link at the bottom, and this presentation will be on the network, so you can download that. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.